Now, I'm a big fan of horror, whether that's video games or films, so it was a real treat to be able to write a piece of music with these four libraries. So let's take a listen to this piece I've written, and a word of warning, it gets really loud about halfway into the piece. With this, I sort of had the joy of experimenting with different dynamic ranges between sections in the music. Okay, here we go. So I've started off using the Angular Strings Evolutions library, and what's super helpful with this library is you can randomize how each evolution is pegged in, whether that's completely randomly or you can cater it to a specific style. So this being a horror piece, I clicked on the scary or tense tabs to initially get a feel for some of the evos before, selecting which one I wanted to use. So starting the piece, I went with an evolution called Tense Lens Flare. I've got that on the low G, and I've also used Bernard Herrmann's Composer Toolkit to fade in some nice low strings, flautando patch, and it makes for a really ominous sound. So here's how that goes. All the fading in and out is done by automating the dynamics and expression. I've also began with the HG2O library, and for those of you that don't know, it's a library based around the waterphone. So as well as some kind of strange percussive hits that you can warp with a water level, it's also packed with loads of really interesting synths. So I'm using the time bow patch, playing a couple of notes. And what's great about this library is there's a wide selection of mics that you can kind of customize within the plugin, so you can create your own mic mix. Here I've got the ambient mic and the close ribbon mic active. I actually turned the water level down for these two notes as I didn't want that warped effect for the start of the piece. But I'll go ahead and show you the difference. So here it is with the water level turned all the way down. And here it is with the water level turned up. So you can get some really strange and beautiful sounds out of that. So as we continue into the piece, we introduce some more of the Bernard Herrmann orchestral section. So we've got our mixed flutes legato, low strings and trombones consort, and the high half string section legato. With the low strings and trombones track, I've actually doubled up the patch within contact and turned one of them an octave lower, because you get a nice, really deep growl. And with both patches, they're using the consort articulation. So let me show you how that sounds. So there's a really nice, huge sound, like there's something sort of looming in the background. Now with the high strings, the legato track, it's playing a small sort of creepy chromatic sequence. Now dissonance is really important with horror stuff, as the lack of harmony just is really unsettling. So I'm going to single out these 3 orchestral tracks so you can hear how they work and build up together. Now we're starting to pile on more and more layers to build that sense of dread and get the hair standing on end. And what better tool to do that than our Angular Strings Evolutions libraries. We start off with some really high-pitched plucks and then devolve into some pitch bends and ascending tremolos and trills. So here are the plucks. And then we've got our tremolos. Some pitch bends. Some trills. Yeah, some wonderfully scary stuff. Helping to add to some of these textures, we've got our high strings octaves playing a tremolo, and it sounds like this. And an on martineau with some sort of weird effect on it playing these trills. I can't help but think of Colin Stetson's score in Hereditary, just with the way he uses the saxophone. So here's how the on martineau sounds. There's also a synth section in the Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit library. There's a wide array of synths, but something that caught my eye was just a little effect called wind. Massive surprise what that's going to be. But I've assigned the faders to the low pass and high pass filter, and it's quite a fun thing to play around with. So here's how it sounds. It's quite a fun thing to play around with, and adds another sort of layer to the chaos. To help give a bit more of a percussive quality as we build to that drop, I'm using the Bernard Herrmann low strings Collegno. I've got that split between 4 tracks, 2 of which pan to their extremes, the other 2 sort of slightly centered, playing this really weird kind of sporadic rhythm. It sounds like it's coming at you from all angles. So I'll go ahead and solo these tracks out for you so you can listen for yourself. And you can hear there's a nice bit of reverb on there as well. You also get a percussion section with the Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit library. I've used both the percussion patch and the timpani patch, playing a drum roll to help build towards what's my favourite sound in the Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit library, which is this. I mean, it speaks for itself. Now, I've used that to transition into what I like to call our chase section, but before I unpick all of that, I'm going to go ahead and play this transition again, just so we can hear it in action. So after all that, we land on some trombones, which I've again detuned down an octave. That's playing the consort patch, and we've also got a studio orchestra patch playing as well. So what I've done with the orchestral patch is I've faded it out about halfway through this section and then brought it back again just with the lower notes. So I'll single out both the trombones and studio orchestra so you can hear how they play out during this section. So you can hear how detuning it down an octave with the trombones gives you a really horrible, raspy kind of quality that's perfect for something like this. Now, percussion is quite a prominent part of this section. So we've got the Bernard Herrmann percussion patch playing on every first and third beat of the bar for about 4 bars. And then in the next 2 bars, we've got our timpani playing on every beat of the bar. And also this sort of metallic clang sound with the percussion patch playing triplets in those 2 bars as well. So here's how the percussion sounds all together. And we switch between those 2 rhythms 3 times during this section. It's worth noting that we've actually changed the tempo. So we started off at 80 BPM and now we're at 160. I also want to draw your attention to what our high strings and brass are doing in this section. We've got the high strings spiccato and brass shorts muted, and they're both playing tritones, but different tritones from one another. So it's a really jarring sound, and they work as kind of more of a rhythmical element for this section. So here's how the high strings sound. And our muted brass shorts, which are brought in by a long consort brass patch. They sound like this. There's also a high strings patch playing a minor second articulation, and that plays during those 2 bars where there's that horrible metal clanging sound, and it's actually copying the same notes that the high string spiccato are doing. So it sounds like this. Again, just adding to that sort of uneasy feeling. We've also got the on Martineau back again, this time playing another effect called Birds, and it sounds like this. Now, finally introducing our Scrape Percussion library. It's a great little library, and similar to HG20, it's got a wide variety of mic mixes. Now, I'm going to take you through some of the patches I've used in this section so you can hear how they sound. The first one being a bicycle wheel bow swell. Then we've got tam tam drumstick long. And finally, I've used some bowed cymbals here, some longs. I mean, you can see why this library is just perfect for horror music. The effects don't stop there. The studio orchestra patch in the Bernard Herrmann Composer Toolkit library has a great number of articulations that are mainly effects based. So I use this one about halfway in this section called Cluster Swells, and it sounds like this. And what's great about this is you can actually control the timing of how that kind of swells in using the mod wheel. So let me show you. All the way down, it's very fast. If I turn it up, it lasts a bit longer. So for this, in my piece, I've actually modulated it so it lasts a bit longer and swells into that final rhythmical element. Now, as we start to wrap up this piece, I've got another HG20 patch. This time it's a synth patch called Catch Your Breath. And I've got that swelling in just before the end, transitioning into our nice long brass section and our Bernard Herrmann slides. So here's how this sounds. So we've got that synth in the ending, as well as another timpani roll, another beautiful slide from the Bernard Herrmann library, and these 2 really horrible dissonant brass chords using the consort patch in the Bernard Herrmann library. So I'll solo those out so you can hear how they sound. And with the higher brass, that's where our crazy slide comes in. There's also another HG20 patch, another synth one called Scary Hiss. I'm sure you can imagine what that sounds like, but I'll go ahead and play it for you anyway. And here's how that whole section works together, from the chase to the build-up to our very quiet ending. So I wanted to have a big dynamic contrast from the build up to the ending, as that's quite common in horror. So I'm only using 4 patches here, 2 of which are some newly introduced HG20 synth patches. So let me go ahead and show you them. The first one we got is called Big Benji, and that gives us our really ominous sort of ending tone. I kind of wanted to create a bit of space at the end from all of that kind of claustrophobic feeling from before. So here's how this patch sounds. And that drones on until the end, along with some more trombones that are detuned down an octave, and also some strings and horns. And our final HG20 patch is called In Space, which gives us those textural sounds in the ending. And that's pretty much it for the piece. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and make sure to grab these products as they're currently 30% off up until October the 31st. I'll see you in the next one. I'm heading off.